Operation Acid Gambit, the rescue of Kurt Muse. According to the Cambridge Dictionary, the word gambit is defined as a clever action in a situation that is intended to achieve an advantage that usually involves taking a risk. During Operation Acid Gambit, a disastrous rescue mission that was only supposed to take 4.5 minutes and be one of the opening operations of the 1989 U.S. invasion of Panama, Delta Force operatives found themselves in a situation so sticky that it was sheer luck rather than tactical gambits that got them out alive. Originally born in Arizona, Kurt Muse grew up in Panama City. After a brief stint in the U.S. Army, he returned to his adopted homeland, but soon became disillusioned with its head of state, General Manuel Noriega, and his increasingly audacious attempts to silence democracy. Consequently, with fellow revolutionaries, he established an anti-government pirate radio broadcast, assembling an array of equipment so advanced that it could overpower the frequencies of any radio station. Kurt's scheme first became known to the Panamanian authorities on October 11, 1987, just as Noriega, to rapturous applause, was going to deliver a speech in a stadium that was also being broadcast nationwide. When the general started to speak, from a nearby rooftop, Muse pressed a button, and a short pre-recorded message from the Free Democratic People of Panama abruptly took over the airwaves. Utterly humiliated, Noriega hunted the perpetrators down, eventually leading to Muse's arrest at Panama City Airport. After being interrogated, he was transferred to the notorious Carcel Modelo prison, where he was thrown into a dirty 8-by-12-foot cell with a tiny bathroom attached. During his 9 months incarceration, Kurt was tortured and constantly haunted by the wailing screams of the other inmates. Aware of the horrific conditions Muse was experiencing, President George Bush ordered the military to mount an immediate rescue mission. In response, the U.S. military's elite counter-terrorist Delta Force, the 160th Special Operations Aviation Group, and the 1st Special Operations Wing were mobilized to carry out Operation Acid Gambit. This would happen simultaneously with the opening deployment of the United States invasion of Panama, Operation Just Cause, the goal of which was to depose General Noriega and arrest him for drug trafficking and racketeering. Several considerations would have to be taken into account to ensure the mission was a success. Firstly, following a failed coup d'etat on October 3, 1989, a paranoid Noriega had ordered military personnel to fortify defensive positions and replace civilian guards at the Carcel Modelo prison. Secondly, complicating matters even further, the Comandancia, the headquarters of the Panama Defense Force, or PDF, was just across the street, possessed a formidable anti-aircraft gun, and was swarming with reinforcements that could be mobilized at the first sign of trouble. Thirdly, and trickiest of all, Noriega had ordered the soldier guarding Muse's cell to kill him if any action was taken against Panama by the United States. These potential dangers in mind, a master plan was formulated. At midnight on December 20th, 1989, Operation Acid Gambit commenced when a Special Forces support team stationed a quarter of a mile away on Quarry Hill killed the soldiers operating the anti-aircraft emplacement at the Comandancia with machine gun fire. Concurrently, snipers took out any targets of opportunity and shot at the electricity generators, plunging the prison into total darkness as the black MH-6 helicopters carrying the assault team drew near. Hopping off their transports, the Delta Force team assumed their position on the roof around the access door, while their colleague, Staff Sergeant Peter Jacobs, rappelled down to Kurt's cell window to assassinate the guard. But after about 3 feet, he was ambushed by fire coming from the prison's adjacent kitchen. Suddenly, the roofline erupted with suppressive fire. Then a Little Bird gunship swung in and silenced them. When Jacobs reached the window, however, the guard was nowhere to be seen. Next, the assault team blasted open the roof door, which signaled the 2 orbiting AC-130 Spectre gunships to attack the Comandancia. High above, the 2 Spectres encircled at different altitudes in a top hat formation and unleashed their loads. Meanwhile, the team dispersed to hold the stairway of the 4th floor, while the others worked their way through the level and dispatched any guards in sight. At the same time, a detachment led by Jim Nelson made their way down to the 3rd floor where Kurt Muse was being held. Pivoting around a corner, he was suddenly within point-blank range of a terrified Panamanian soldier, whose hands shot up in surrender. He was cuffed and held while Nelson and his 4-man squad continued down a narrow hallway. A couple moments later, they were outside Kurt Muse's cell. After asking him if he was okay, they shouted at him to take cover in his bathroom as they planted an explosive charge on the locked door of an adjacent room where the guard had barricaded himself in. The door was blown to smithereens, and Nelson and his colleague Chris Simone moved in to clear the room. The guard who had been hiding behind the door was shot twice in the chest, twice in the stomach, and once in the head by Nelson. Next, Paul Jones blasted the lock off Kurt's cell with a 12-gauge shotgun, charged into the cell, flung himself over the prisoner to protect him from shrapnel and debris from outside, and then helped him put on a Kevlar helmet and flak vest. Forming a human shield around their precious cargo, Kurt was bundled up the stairs and onto the roof. Seconds later, a swarm of Little Bird helicopters touched down, and he was unceremoniously thrown into the first one. Kurt was placed in a protective position between two soldiers, and Jim Nelson and the rest of his team jumped in as bullets ricocheted off the chopper. Kurt sighed with relief as they became airborne, but just as he thought he was safe, there was a huge bang. The helicopter's engine had been hit, and now they were losing altitude. Forced to land in a narrow street 1 block away from the now burning Comandancia, the soldiers jumped out and formed a defensive perimeter before they were called back to the helicopter. Hovering inches from the ground, the pilot accelerated down a short street before making a sharp turn onto a much longer block as PDF troops took aim at the limping helicopter from every possible angle. Jim Nelson's team clung onto the aircraft's benches to provide suppressing fire, working in concert with the Little Bird gunships overhead. A third of the way down the longer street, the AH-6 miraculously started to lift off. Then, all at once, the Panamanian defenders scored several direct hits. Paul Jones was hit in his Kevlar-shielded chest and was knocked out of the chopper, falling 20 feet to the ground. Meanwhile, Jim Nelson's left knee was pierced by a round from below. Suddenly, the helicopter violently jolted to the right, smashed into the wall of a building, crash-landed onto the street, and came to rest upright. Kurt and the rest of the occupants were ejected on impact. Nelson's left foot had been gruesomely crushed by the landing skid. When Kurt recovered from his daze, he realized that the twisted wreckage was being shot at by nearby assailants. Next to him, an uninjured soldier told him to stay where he was while he found cover. Kurt, an Army veteran, was given a pistol as his rescuer set off. Almost immediately, the soldier was struck on the head by the still-turning rotor blades. Astonishingly, he regained consciousness, and the pair scampered across the street to take cover at the side of an apartment building. There, they stumbled upon Chris Simone, who brought them further up to where a defensive perimeter had been established. Hemmed in on the sidewalk between a brick wall and parked cars were 7 Delta Force, 4 of them critically injured, including the man who had tumbled out of the chopper mid-air, who was now drifting in and out of consciousness. Only Kurt and the pilot had emerged unscathed from the gunfire and the crash. Realizing their commander was missing in action, Chris dashed back to the wreckage and retrieved Jim Nelson, who had managed to pull his mangled foot free. An infrared strobe light invisible to the naked eye was activated. A Black Hawk helicopter detected it and passed on their location, and minutes later, a convoy of M113 armored personnel carriers arrived to extract them. The mission had been accomplished, but not in the way that anyone had envisioned. And amazingly, everyone had lived to tell the tale. Upon completion, it became the first time ever that an American counter-terrorist unit had rescued an American hostage from enemy hands. Today, it remains one of the most dramatic Delta Force operations ever carried out.